This is a talk about diglossia, from the Greek di for two, glossia, the tongue, two languages. And diglossia is a model of a social situation in which two languages operate. I'm going to read for you the classic definition by Ferguson, 1959. It's long, but here goes. Diglossia is a relatively stable language situation in which, in addition to the primary dialects, varieties of the language, which may include a standard or regional standards, there is a very divergent, highly codified, often grammatically more complex, superimposed variety. So we have two varieties. The vehicle of a large and respected body of written literature, either of an earlier period or in another speech community. So we have this superimposed variety, which is learned largely by formal education, so people go to school to learn this second variety, and is used for most written and formal spoken purposes, but is not used by any section of the community for ordinary conversation. And that is a very complex sort of description of what is a remarkably common, widespread situation. We might think of some classical examples, such as in Haiti. You have Haitian Creole spoken in the streets, everybody speaks Haitian Creole, and Standard French as the superimposed variety. Superimposed, well, the Creole comes from the mixture, but the two operate side by side and have two different social functions. Similarly, if you go to Morocco, you will find there's Moroccan Arabic spoken and classical Arabic written. The laws are in classical Arabic, the king speaks classical Arabic, and many people, at least the waiters in the restaurants I go to there, don't know what he's saying. Look up the very interesting diglossic situations in Norway and in Greece for other examples a little closer to home, perhaps. You'll find that in these situations, or Swiss Germany, where you have Swiss German spoken and Standard German as what's called the H variety. Early in the description of diglossia, people would talk about high and low as the two varieties. Dangerous terms, but they're not much better when reduced to H and L. But it's common enough to speak about H varieties and L varieties. L, the ones used for everyday conversation, for group identity, for expressions and feelings of solidarity, for intimacy, and H is then the variety used for formal communication, official communication, laws, literature, as mentioned, although contemporary post-colonial literature mixes these varieties, as we mentioned in the previous talk. And the important thing is that in many, many situations, these two varieties, these two levels or social functions, coexist. As Ferguson's definition says, it's a stable situation. It doesn't mean that the H variety displaces the L or gets rid of it. In fact, what tends to happen, if you consider our dominant languages, what tends to happen is that the L overtakes the H. All our Romance languages existed in diglossic situations with Latin. Spanish was L with Latin as the H. French, Italian, etc. The same could be said of English. English is perhaps more of a mixture, but you had the Anglo-Saxon being spoken as L, and Norman, Old French, being spoken as H. And the one that overtook the other, in general terms, is the L. So there's no reason to believe that if your language is cast as an L, you are being dominated or excluded from history, or you're going to die. You might stand a better chance of dying as a language if you're in a restricted H position, as indeed was the case of Latin, when it became a language of learning. In the definitions, you can have a strict definition of diglossia, in which the two varieties are varieties of the same language, and that, I think, is what Ferguson is speaking about. Or, as you read in Holmes, you can have a loose definition where we say, well, any two varieties needn't be of the same language. And that opens up the scope for looking at a great many other situations, particularly the post-colonial situations, where you have conflict between English, for example, as a superimposed H variety, and other languages which are operating as L. So I think it makes sense from our perspective, since we're focusing on English here, to use it in a looser sense, not insisting that the two varieties be varieties of the one language. The concept of diglossia is rather unpopular with my colleagues in the Catalan department at this wonderful university. Why is an interesting question. We live in a community that has two languages, Catalan and Spanish, at least two. And certainly during the years of repression of Catalan, for most of the Franco regime, you would say that Spanish was H and Catalan was L. A classic diglossic situation in the loose sense. And my colleagues in the Catalan department say, well, the concept of diglossia legitimizes this repressive situation, suggests that it's good, suggests that it's stable, suggests that the life of the Catalan language was fundamentally not threatened by this repressive regime. And I think they're right, and I think they are also right in the sense that the concept of diglossia was developed to describe other kinds of situations around the world, and notably with respect to English. However, it's an interesting question to ask if now in Catalonia we have a diglossic situation. And you'll find in some communities, yes, and in other communities, no, it's not the case. And in some communities, Spanish is operating as L and Catalan is a superimposed H, and in other communities it may be the reverse. It's an interesting question. I don't think we can mix up, though, and this is the final point I want to make, we cannot mix up diglossia, two languages, with bilingualism. The Latin, by two, lingual, the tongue languages. My colleagues want a bilingual country. For English language social linguistics, bilingualism refers to the individual's capacity to use two languages, to make mistakes in both, for example. So Joshua Fishman can draw up a schema looking at bilingual situations with diglossia and without diglossia. The two concepts are very different. Diglossia is a social situation, bilingualism is an individual's capacity. The unfortunate thing is that English social linguistics recognizes diglossia, but seems not to have a name for a community where two languages have exactly the same social functions. We don't have a name for that. The trouble is, I personally have not found an example of it, which might suggest that diglossia is a general case rather than the imposition of a few English language social linguistics. Go out and look for the cases of equality between languages, and I wish you luck if you find some.